Welcome to the 7th episode of the Omnis Studio online training series, Web Development Basics. I've been looking forward to today's video for a long time. We are building a login. That means we apply what we have already learnt and combine it with the possibility to switch remote forms. We have already covered some important basics in the previous videos. Today, we're going to apply some of them and build a login for our application. So here I am, you won't be surprised, in our well-known project library. The RemoteForm Hello World that we developed earlier in the first training video can serve as a solid basis for our login. So I'll just rename it, right-click, and rename JS Login. Don't be surprised too much about the abbreviation JS. In Omnis Studio, it has become a habit that the names of remote forms always start with JS. Okay, now let's redesign the form a little. I need a second input field here. Just a second. Now, when I look at the name, I think I should give it a proper name. And since this input field is for the username, let's call it entry username and change the label to username. And now a second field. Let's call that entry password. In the data name, I write a new variable. I input password. Yes, type character fits. Then I change the label to password. And now it's time to set the isPassword property to ktrue. Now let me show you what the effect is. Here in the username field, I can enter some text. But here in the password field also, but you can no longer see it, just these dots. That fits perfectly. Okay, back to the remote form. I now want to move the button below the two input fields, and I'll change the text to Login and rename it to Button Login. Okay, our design is completed. Now all that's missing is the logic. And since this should be triggered when the button is clicked, I go directly into the code behind the button. I'll just delete the old code, as well as the greet and check class methods. Okay. I don't do much here in the $event because I want to keep the code as clean as possible, and therefore move the code for validating the entered data to a class method. Actually, that's not quite correct, but it works for today. So, a new class method, and I'll call it login. And here we now have to check whether the values in the instance variables IInputEntry and IInputPassword, which are linked to the input fields, match the login data of a valid user. However, as we do not yet have a database in which, for example, the login data is stored, we simulate this with two class variables. First, cUsername. Character is OK, and as an initial value, I now choose a username with which we can log in. For example, Max. The inverted commas are important here, as they make sure it is accepted as a string. And the second variable we call cPassword, with the initial value of the password, for example, Omnis. OK, and there is one more thing I wanted to do. I changed the name of the instance variable from IInputEntry to IInputUsername. And the great thing is that Omnis automatically replaces the name in all other places in our app with the new variable name. So our input field for the username remains linked to the variable. Right now, the new name, IInputUsername, is automatically entered here. In our method, we now use an if statement to check whether the username and password match the specified data. So, first the username, because if it's not correct, we don't even have to check the password. If cUsername equals IInputUsername. If it matches, we don't do anything for now. If it doesn't match, i.e. else, then we end the method directly with quit method. Or wait, we can do this even better. We simply say, if the username does not match, then quit method without the else. So here is the whole thing in a not function, and the else is removed. Perfect. The not function does nothing else than reverse the result of our check. So if the result is k true, it returns k false and vice versa. And now the same for the password. But instead of using the not function again, we now simply use a different operator. Actually, we use is not equal to this time rather than is equal to. So if cPassword, and now an actual lowercase and an actual uppercase character, and then I input password. This basically just says if cPassword is not equal to I input password, then quit method like before. And if the code flow, as I call it, has reached this point and has not been terminated before, then the username and password must match the previously defined ones. And then we change the remote form to one which only the logged-in user should be able to access. In our case, we temporarily switch to the variables form. So we write here, do $ctask.$change_form, and now here in the brackets, in apostrophes, variables. If you remember our video about variable scopes, you may already know why we say $ctask. In other words, why we tell the current task to change the form. In short, we are changing the form within the task, and therefore any task variables set here are retained in the next form. At this stage, please note that you can save a user object in a task variable after login, so that you can access it later from any form in the application to display the name or, for example, to check whether the user is logged in at all and is therefore allowed to see the form or not. Well, that's it with the method. Now we just have to call it from the button. So here in the $event, do method login. Okay, I would say let's test our work. Without input, nothing happens. I'll enter some nonsense. Nothing either. And if we now enter max here and omnis here, then wonderfully we get to the next page. Now I want to show you one last little trick. You've probably already seen that you can log in with the Enter key without having to press the button with the mouse. That works here now. No, it doesn't work yet. But we can set that. To do this, I go back to the form and click on the background so that I can see the properties of the remote form itself. And here there is now the OK key object property. We can now select a button that should react to pressing the Enter key, in our case, the button Login. Let's take a look at this. Once again, Max and Omnis. Top. Alright, that's it for today. That was some more development practice again. The whole thing is slowly taking shape. I'm looking forward to it. In the next video, we'll take a look at what lists are and how we can store values in them. Until then, take care.